Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism. I'm Rivka.
And I'm Frank. And we're here on a pretty dreary Wednesday afternoon here in New York, 1 week before Thanksgiving. Just a little housekeeping up top. We will be taking next week off, Thanksgiving week. So there will not be a new MVC, but we'll be back the following week. And then soon we'll be getting into our holiday episodes.
Frank, are you going to go home for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I'm going to Jersey to see the fam.
That's exciting. I bet the food is incredible.
The food is very, very good. My uncle, who owned a deli, usually cooks, and along with my aunt, and they're great fucking cooks. So it's like a mishmash between, you know, American Thanksgiving standards and then some Italian items. Like there will be a giant antipasto spread, you know, right at the top before the food even starts.
Ugh, amazing.
What are you doing for Thanksgiving? You usually stick around the city, right?
We always stay in the city because my mom's here and Tommy's here, and then we get together with our good friend Chase. So we've kind of alternated like where we host, but we're going to go there, and some of Tommy's family will come and friends. It's kind of like but we'll cook a little. We'll do hors d'oeuvres.
I do love and miss a Friendsgiving. That was one of my favorite things about when I lived in LA was just, you know, not being able to, I didn't love not being able to afford to travel home, but, you know, by necessity, you end up having, you know, a Thanksgiving with friends. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I love my family. I love getting to see my family, but a little bit different when you're like a younger generation Thanksgiving.
A younger generation. A young gen. I know. I did mushrooms one end of Thanksgiving.
What?
That was a good one. That was a really good. Yeah, it was really good. It's the best time to do mushrooms because you're really full. So you have like a nice.
Oh, I don't think I would want to.
Smooth.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be tripping with a full stomach.
It was actually great because it kind of made it like easier. Like I think the mistake is like when you have an empty stomach, that's when you get really sick.
That's true. That is true. I do remember our first Thanksgiving in Los Angeles together that we spent at your godmother's house.
Yeah.
Yes, our first Thanksgiving in Los Angeles after having just moved there the previous summer after graduating. We're at Riv's godparents' house, who are lovely people, warm hosts. But right before the meal starts, your godmother, on a silver platter, starts bringing around to the guests pre-rolled joints. And was like, does anyone need any pot? Anyone need any pot before we start eating? Anyone need any pot? And I was like, holy shit, we're in California. This is
in
wild.
California.
And I got so stoned. I got like,
stoned.
Couldn't even talk stoned at that dinner.
Those were the days.
Fun times. Well, we had one thing we wanted to talk about, not a news story. Wanted to have more of just like a general conversation. We haven't done one of these in a while. But a little bit of background for the listeners. My father has been listening to this podcast quite a bit. Shout out to my dad, Tom. Great supportive parent.
Tom, it's an honor.
And, you know, he has his thoughts. He's not someone who is going to hold back his criticisms. He brought up something I wanted to talk to you about. So he said to me, you know, I've noticed that you guys have used the term radical and radicalized, you know, a bunch in your conversation, saying, you know, this was, you know, the Bernie 2016 campaign or the pandemic was around the time that we started becoming radicalized and getting more into leftist, anti-capitalist political theory. So what my dad said was, you know, I think you guys should try to avoid using that word because I think it might put some people off. I think a lot of people, especially my generation, we only hear that word in terms of extreme violence. You know, you're watching cable news and it's, oh, the mass shooter was radicalized by blah, 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 or the terrorist was radicalized by blah, blah, blah. So to him, he's saying, you know, this has a very negative, scary connotation. And I think you might be able to bring more people in and not turn people off if you avoid using language like that. And we had a full conversation and I explained to him, you know, the term radical, I'll just read the dictionary definition right now, is relating to or affecting the fundamental nature of something. And a radical is a person who advocates thorough or complete political or social reform. And the way that I learned about the term radical when we were getting into this work was radical really means to take something up from the root, meaning you recognize that the system itself is corrupt and dysfunctional from its very root. So we need to be looking at and thinking about solutions to the root causes of these problems. So that's how I know that I'm imagining, I don't want to speak for you, you and I kind of view the term radical right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, coming from, and mathematically, I think radical is getting to the root.
Oh, okay.
Like refers to the root number.
Oh, I didn't know that. And I took calculus. All right. So I explained this all to my dad, and he was receptive to it, but he ultimately was like, yeah, I hear that, but like I'm telling you, people will hear that and they will get scared. And
yeah.
I don't know what the right answer to that question is. I don't disagree.
I mean, I think you're totally right. I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess it's a question of, I think it's such an important thing to always be reminded of, especially as we're like at this pivot point of how do we build a working class and how do you bring more people in. So I think
exactly
that kind of language is important. But I think education and I think having the ability to have conversations like this where you express how you're talking about it and like not saying like not giving up the language of that word or knowing that it also in itself holds like a deep power to say radical. What I love about the term, I guess, artistically, is I feel like the experience is having a coin flipped. It's like the ability, it's like, so it's almost like a word that was so scary can become so important and deep, like just have a totally complete different shift in meaning.
Yeah, it's a perspective shift.
I think it's important that when you're, depending on your aims and your goals and who you're talking to, being aware of that. I would say in this podcast, I wonder, we haven't, I'm sure we get like a wide audience, but I think part of our politic is not to soften per se.
Not to soften per se, but we did start this show with the intent of creating sort of an entry-level anti-capitalist program that could bring people in from the vantage point of movies in a way that we could talk to people who haven't thought about these concepts before. But I do know that, a lot of these words, like a lot of leftist terms, they're often used by especially corporate media or, right-wing politicians and they have been used over decades in ways that are meant to evoke scariness, in ways that are, to evoke this is bad, like anarchy. We've had a conversation about anarchy. Anarchy is like a political theory, framework, and ideology, but also someone on Fox News will say, if the far left has its way, it'll be anarchy in the streets. And that's,
my middle schooler's favorite word these days is anarchy. I'm like, how are you today? We're checking in. Anarchy. Okay.
That's cool as shit. That's super cool. But the same thing for the word radical. I'm sure someone was like, yeah, start throwing the word radical in there. That way people are always afraid of it. And it's actually, it ends up developing this negative connotation.
I guess I think that's why in some ways it's powerful. Like I understand you kind of looking at like when there was the potential of a Bernie Sanders around like 2016 and 2020 and this feeling of like, don't say socialism. Like, don't say that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that I think owning the term and educating is actually more useful than trying to avoid, because they're going to use the word radical negatively regardless. And I think what's useful for us is that the context of the conversations we have can hopefully give someone listening a different perspective on the term. No,
that's a good point. And I think I side more with what you were saying, which is these words have meaning and we should take ownership of these words and their meanings, especially if they are part of our political project. And where I appreciate what Tom is saying is like, it's kind of it's a part of the, the work that I've talked about that I do here, where we like a huge lesson that we speak to our science students about in communication is jargon. And the term radical is a piece of jargon that is used in two very different ways. So if you assume, and I'm sure we've done that here because we kind of make the assumption of our audience and it's just like becoming a reminder of it, of like assuming that people know what you mean with any words you use really, but especially with words that have emotional weight to them.
like the term radical, so that if you're talking to someone and you're saying, I'm using the term radical, this is what I mean by it. It might actually be an aha. It might be the first time they've heard that word used in that way. And it might radicalize them.
I totally agree. Although I do think, this podcast is different because we've been doing it over years and, people have built a relationship. I do think if you're just out in the real world, maybe don't lead with, I'm a communist. This is what I think. Because I've done that before and I've seen the way that people immediately shut down. And instead of that, maybe it's more just like, I believe that we should all have healthcare, that everyone should be able to have a house, that everyone should have clean food and water, that everyone should have blah, 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 like in these things. And then start with what you actually believe, and then the labels can come later. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, I wish that was how we did our elections. My stepmom did that in her high school class where they were doing like blind, they were doing their own kind of like blind elections, but it was just all the students knew were policy. So they couldn't have, especially at that age, you're so attached to just like the meaning of Democrat, Republican, and like what your parents think. And they only saw policy, and they all went green. Surprise, surprise.
All right, that's it. I mean, I don't think we're going to avoid using the word radical or radicalized, but maybe we'll start adding a little additional context here and there.
Yeah, Tom, bring us another one. This was good.
Tom also pitched that we should do an MVC series on the TV show Yellowstone. And you know what? He had a
great idea.
He had a pretty comprehensive pitch on how he would discuss its politics. So,
wow, that's a great idea. I mean, I haven't watched it, but I'm aware that it is one of the most popular shows.
Yeah, it's a massive show. Just in terms of SEO and reach, we would.
Yeah,
it would be
like that show. Arguably, is if you want to understand like the American populace, you got to watch Yellowstone, and that I have not.
Yeah, I have not either. All right, so maybe at some point we have my dad on to talk about Yellowstone.
I'm into it. I'm ready to binge some Yellowstone.
All right, well, let's get to our conversation today. A very, very fun one with returning guest Joe Mayall. But before we do, our lovely audience, we would just like to remind you that we do not sell ads on this show. No. We rely on community support to keep this show going. So if you would like to support us, you can do that by subscribing to our Patreon.
That is right. For just $5 a month, you get access to new bonus episodes and our entire back catalog. Our Patreon link is in the episode description in your podcast player, or you can find it at mvcpod.com. Also, please make sure to rate, review, subscribe to our podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes, and also so we can find other people and maybe radicalize them.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Joe Mayall on our conversation about Alien Romulus. Hey everyone, we've got a great organization we want to tell you about called Creatives Thrive NYC. CTNYC helps artists and creatives build the financial skills to keep art a priority in their lives while still putting food on the table. CTNYC is an innovative year-round training initiative providing expert financial knowledge, trusted resources, and a network of reliable partners to help creatives thrive in a chaotic and unjust economy.
CTNYC is a partnership between ArtBuild, PAM and Dialect, Get Shameless, and the Entertainment Community Fund, formerly the Actors Fund. These fully funded, completely free workshops share real-world financial tools as well as methods to build a life that fits your budget and your values.
These workshops are 100% virtual, and you do not need to be in New York or even the United States to join. Workshops begin from November 2024 and continue through June 2025.
Register at artbuilt.org/CTNYC and check out artbuilt.org, getshameless.com, and entertainmentcommunity.org. All right, we are back with a recurring guest. Joe Mayall is joining us again. Joe is a writer, author, labor activist based in Denver. He's written for Jacobin, The Progressive Magazine, Balls and Strikes, and elsewhere, and he's currently working on a book detailing the theory and practice of economic democracy. All of his work can be found at joewrote.com, a blog dedicated to exploring life through a leftist lens. Welcome back to the pod, Joe.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be back. Happy to talk about Alien and, geek out.
I'm so glad that you reached out to us, Joe. Joe emailed and said, hey, we gotta talk Alien Romulus. And I hadn't seen it yet, and I was looking for an excuse to watch it. So, Joe, thank you very much.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we get into the Alien convo, Joe, we were just talking quickly off mic. You actually finished your book, is that right?
I did, yeah. So it was the first nonfiction book I wrote. So after I wrote it, I learned you have to write a proposal for your book, which is like a thesis paper to sell it to a bunch of people. So that took me another 6 months. Much harder to write a proposal than the actual book. And so it's going well. It's under consideration for a couple publishing houses. They're reading it right now, and who knows, maybe by the time the next Alien movie comes out and I'm back here, it'll be published or something like that. So fingers crossed.
Hell yeah,
Awesome.
that's awesome. Congrats just on finishing.
Yeah, that's
finishing
huge.
any major literary work of any kind, that's always a huge accomplishment regardless. So
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was pretty good to, seal it up and send it off to some people because I've read it probably 20 times at this point, and I think I'm done with it.
yeah, I've lost all perspective on it. Is this good anymore? I have no idea. Classic writing process. All right. Well, let's get into this movie today. Like I mentioned, today we are discussing Alien Romulus, a relatively new movie for this podcast. Came out this past year, 2024, written and directed by Fede Álvarez. This movie stars Kaylee Spaney, David Johnson, Archie Renault, Isabella Merced, Spike Fern, and Eileen Wu. This movie had a budget of $80 million, and it grossed over $350 million worldwide. In a brief synopsis, we will be spoiling this movie. But if you have not seen it, you want a quick breakdown, basically, it is an alien movie. So 6 downtrodden young space colonists encounter hostile creatures while scavenging a derelict space station. And then some shit goes haywire.
Does not go according to plan.
It does not go well.
Yeah.
So, yes, this is a new release. It was released just a couple months ago on August 16th, 2024. Just as a reminder, and maybe for some reference if you're listening to this in the future, here are some things that went down in 2024. We entered into the new year as Israel continued its attack on Palestine and its genocide in Gaza, resulting in a growing Free Palestine movement in the U.S. and around the world. There were a series of occupation protests by pro-Palestinian students, which took place at Columbia University in New York from April to June, as well as hundreds of other protests across college campuses around the country. As the U.S. 2024 election season started to get underway, on July 13th, former President Donald Trump was shot in the ear in an attempted assassination. Shortly after, Joe Biden resigned as the Democratic nominee for president following a pretty mortifying public debate against Trump. And then Kamala Harris stepped in as the new nominee. And the rest remains to be seen.
Oh, man, that seems such a uneventful year when you put it
Some other things, in case that didn't give you enough context. The summer was also dubbed Brat Summer, because Charlie XCX's album became a pop sensation along with Chappell Rowan's rise in popularity, Sabrina Carpenter, and of course, 2024 became the year of billionaire pop star with Taylor Swift's Eras Tour dominating headlines, setting records. So, a few points of contact with the year 2024 in case...
Yeah, just a few.
You forget what went down.
I do keep forgetting that Trump was almost assassinated. Like that, I genuinely keep forgetting that happens. And then every once in a while I'll see a photo and be like, oh, that's right. Yeah.
Apparently in South Carolina, where my partner's family is from, that was like a very popular Halloween costume.
Of course. Of course. Yeah. I hope I forget 2024. I hope I'm listening to this in a couple of years and I'm just like, Riv, all your notes are bringing me back, because I hope this year is just a blank space on my mind when I look back. So hopefully that jogs the good parts of my memory.
So Joe, we like to start the movie conversation, by asking our guest, why did you choose this movie to talk about on this podcast?
Yeah. So one, I wanted to, close the loop, come back. I know we talked about Alien, I believe, a year ago. And as this is probably, in my opinion, the closest movie in the franchise to the original Alien, as opposed to like the spin-offs or anything like that. I really felt that the anti-capitalist themes were front and center, even very explicitly, because I think people didn't get it the first time. And so I wanted to chat with it with some folks who kind of understood that is the through line of this franchise. And I think that's probably the best way to understand this film, both its successes and its flaws, in my opinion. So I knew who to call.
You were right. You were right. I felt the same way. So I this was my first time seeing this movie. I was going to try to make it to the theater to see it over the summer, but just didn't get around to it. So glad to get to watch it now. I agree. I think thematically and plot-wise, it's the closest to the first Alien in terms of the story beats and hitting sort of those main anti-capitalist themes that make the first Alien movie feel so lived in. You know, in the first Alien, it's a bunch of miners working on a ship, and it's like that's their rig, and they're complaining about their contract and how much they're getting paid. In this movie, it's miners in a different way because they are all, I think, at or around the age of 18, or if not younger, who have been conscripted to this, I don't know, mining colony where basically they cannot escape ever. They're essentially slaves. They are slaves in all but name. And yeah, and then the way that the story unfolds, very similar plot beats in terms of, like, you know, they get to the weird ship, shit goes crazy. There's one female protagonist at the end who's the last one standing. But there were some key differences that we'll get into. But I really love this movie, and I love this franchise because, as you said, Joe, like this is a very rich franchise in terms of actual thematic elements that are relevant to any real person's life. Unlike Star Wars, where it's like Star Wars, like, you know, unless you're watching Andor is a totally different beast. But yeah, so I've talked enough. Riv, what were your thoughts?
I was a Alien virgin, and then we watched because you had us watch, Joe, and I loved it. And I have not watched any other movies in between then and now, just because we watch so many other movies all the time. It just hasn't happened. So these are the only two reference points I have. So the themes I was just like, wow, I guess they really get it every time.
No.
But, but I loved, I agree. I thought it was so, you know, it's hit or miss for me with sci-fi, and this just really hit. I thought it was just so well done. The acting was really, really good. I just enjoyed the whole thing, but also because the themes were so strong. From the very beginning, there was a line at the top when Kaylee Spaney's character it's set up that she's trying to get to this one planet where she can finally see the sun. So you get the sense that they've grown up in this planet where they're just mining. Their parents are dying, a lot of them from being miners, and like the toxicity of this place. It's just a place where you work to live, and the corporation is sort of a death factory, and the corporation is essentially your government and sets the rules for everybody there. And so Kaylee Spaney's character goes to basically say, okay, I guess what's set up is that you work a certain amount of years, and then your contract is up and you get to like leave, and she wants to go to this planet where she can see the sun. And they tell her, oh, actually, rules have changed. Instead of 12 years, like, you need 24. So you're here twice. So the rules just keep changing. And I love that, like, while that scene is happening on the outside, the character Andy, who's the robot-esque brother, who we'll get into lots of interesting complications, but like the non-human robot that we fall in love with, so well played. Outside, there's protests, and there's someone that you hear say, they sell us hope to keep us slaves. And I thought that was like the strongest theme of this movie, was just right there spelled out. The beginning made me think of like Children of Men a lot, like the way that they kind of like you're just entered into this world and you understand so much of the political complexities of it, but it's just done so well. I thought it was close to Children of Men. But they sell us hope to keep us slaves was sort of the theme for me throughout, and how that resonated so much of like how much just where we're at in this current election cycle, and how hope is such a useful political drug, and how useful hope is for propaganda, like fake hope, and what real hope really is. And yeah, all of that was kind of going through my mind as we watched the film play out.
For sure. Yeah. I know I heard some people say it like gets a little slow to start, this film, which I think is probably true, but I think the first 20 minutes like give you so much information about the world,
That
right?
was my favorite
like,
part was the first 20 minutes.
For sure, yeah. That's why I love Alien so much. It's just like the expanded universe. Like there's really the whole series in like the books and everything is super anti-capitalist and very fascinating. And so I understand that people were like, you know, where's the monster? It's got to start killing people. But they do a really good job explaining stuff to you, like, and building you this full world, or rather even like the universe, right? In the span of like 20 minutes without like beating you over the head with it, right? There's no exposition dump where one character's like, so we're on this planet and it's controlled by this corporation, and we're like, it's very well done. They even introduced like the AI Andy very well, and how, you know, the people both on this planet and Yardvaga, I believe is the name of the one they're trying to get to, aren't welcoming to AI.
Yes.
Like they beat them up in the beginning, and then all the other kids, like, or all the other teens, I guess, are like super mean to him and cruel. And so it really gives you a feel for the Alien universe in a way that I think while Alien, the original, did, because we only see, I think, like 7 or 8 characters in that movie, you can get by saying like, okay, like maybe the universe or the future is good, but the people on this ship are having a bad time. This one, they hit you right off the bat, where I think they say like population 6 million or something like that of this planet, and then 0 days of sunlight. So they're like really telling you like, okay, the future sucks for anyone who is working class. Like you really can't get around that. And on top of all the cool alien stuff, I really thought they nailed the opening very well.
I loved the opening. I actually thought the pace of this movie was fantastic. Several times I checked where I was, and I was like, damn, we got to be near the end. And it was only,
Same.
you know, like halfway through the movie. And I'm not saying that the movie felt slow. I'm like, it felt like we were covering so much ground. But I mean, that criticism that the Alien movie is slow to start, I take issue with, because every Alien movie is slow to start. The alien never shows up until at least 30 or 45 minutes into the movie. It would be so boring
if they did, because it's not like there's not that much to give.
Sometimes there's
arrives.
there's a crash, or there's some sort of space emergency that kind of serves as your big first opening set piece. But I didn't miss it in this, and I thought the world building was so good for all the reasons you're laying out. I also love that the mining colony was called Jackson Star. Just thought that was just such a podunk ass sounding name for a planet, Jackson Star. My favorite moment from the whole beginning is, once the group of kids, teens, young adults, once they bring Kaylee Spaney in and tell her the plan of, hey, we discovered that there is basically an abandoned space station above the planet. No one knows about it yet, so we got to get up there and steal some fuel so we can get off of this planet. And there's a great moment where, and small, but it's Kaylee Spaney basically is doing the thing of, well, that's breaking the rules. Like, we can't do that. Like, if we break the rules, then what are the chances of us ever getting off? Like, if they find out and we get in trouble, then they'll never let us leave. And that just really stuck out to me as, I don't know, just like the illusion of free choice that we're given under this system, or the feeling that like, if you have to, it's a very like liberal democratic sentiment of like, we have to keep decorum, we have to play by the rules, we can't tarnish the institutions, because if we do any of that stuff, then things could get much worse. So it's like, yo, I'm a slave. I am literally a slave. I would just like to not be that anymore. But I thought that was just it was just a great illumination of how coercion under the system becomes internalized, and then people are actually like coercing themselves into maintaining the system.
I kind of took that as, not to jump ahead, and I'm sure we'll get into like the AI, and I have other thoughts about Andy that I'm sure you guys kind of share with me. But like, throughout the whole movie, like there's this question of Andy's directive, like what he has been ordered to do, what he's allowed to do by Weyland-Yutani, the company that made him and programmed him. And it changed a few times through the movies, right? Like at first it was protect Rain, and then it was do what's in the best interest of the company. And I kept coming back to like Rain and the other characters are very frustrated and at times frustrated is an understatement. Very angered by his change in directives and stuff. But the movie starts with them taking directives, right? Like she walks into the, I don't know what you call it, payment office and says, I'm done. And they don't say, no, you're staying here for the rest of life. They say, actually, your hours have been increased, right? So like, it's still the system you know and trust, and you've been told is the best one for you, but you have to keep working. And that is like Rain's directive at that point, Frank, where she's like, well, we can't do that.
Yeah.
That's outside the rules. And she breaks that directive and stuff. And then I thought that was really interesting how like throughout the movie, they keep coming back to Andy, like being stuck on his directive, and no one really, says like, hey, you were the same as him, right? At the beginning of this movie, you were doing what's best for Wayland Yutani, which is exactly what he's doing now. And so I thought that was a very interesting parallel.
That's super interesting. No, yeah, I was with you too, Frank. That moment stood out to me so strongly. And I just think it was really smart that the order in which that happened, that we were already in a place to like, as an audience, be like, oh, I get it. Like, you're wrong. You're working for this. Like, it just set it up so well that you're already on the side of the anti-capitalist argument, where you just know like, no, that's a lie. But it feels just so resonant of like so many arguments. Yeah. As you were saying, that we see occurring today, and how scary it is, because the only alternative is, oh, well, then I have to break the system. It's unknown, right? So it's like people stick with that because at least you know what the rules are.
And it is dangerous, right? Like both in science fiction and in real world, operating outside like what is considered acceptable comes with risks, right?
Absolutely.
And they run into those risks right away. And, Rain, like, had the option to say, I'm staying within the system and I'm staying, quote unquote, safe, right? And I think that's probably what, like, kept her there and her concern for Andy in the beginning. But, like, it is interesting how once she steps outside the system, like, not that inside it was safe because we know her parents died, but it brought, like, a whole new set of risks that she wasn't prepared for.
I'd say if I had like one major critique on the film is that I don't think it iterates on the anti-capitalist themes of the first film too much. Like kind of how I was saying before, beat for beat, a lot of the story feels the same. So I wasn't getting anything new. I don't think the movie was saying too much new that the original Alien was saying, except for the AI character and the AI conversation, which I want to get to. But yeah, I mean, Joe, like you're like myself, a scholar of this series. I think even more so, because I haven't read any of the books or anything. But would you say that there's something in this movie that is unique or has evolved the anti-capitalist critique further than let's just say Alien 1, and let's not consider the other movies?
Not inherently. I think you're right. I think this is like kind of that version of like a studio doesn't want to do a shot for shot remake, right? They don't want to say we're remaking Alien, but they want to capture that feeling. I didn't pick up too much on any of additional anti-capitalist themes. Like there are actually, we can get into this. This movie is heavily based on the video game that came out about a decade ago, which was a huge inspiration. Yeah. But a lot of the books have like anti-imperialist themes, right? As they start going to other planets and, the company wants to colonize them and stuff, which we haven't really seen yet in a movie.
I mean, like Prometheus and Covenant have almost religious themes, biblical themes, creation themes, which I appreciate. I appreciate those in those movies for its own reasons.
For sure. Yeah. The one thing I do think that this movie does well, which actually was even present to a lesser degree in the first one, but of course is the AI. I think, there's an element of this all throughout like every single movie that is even remotely an Alien movie. I liked the way that I definitely want to talk to you guys about the character Andy, but I like the way they kind of handled his upgrade. So if people haven't seen it, like Andy is kind of like a borderline malfunctioning, almost unhealthy like android who like stutters a lot and stuff. And then like at probably a third of the way through the movie, he gets like a new chip or something and becomes like a super sophisticated, like just like super high tech robot. And, you know, Rain, we'll call her the sister, struggles with that. And I thought that was really interesting because like at this point, and as someone who works with AI and technology, I don't think like ChatGPT is anywhere near the level of artificial intelligence. But what we are seeing is like people are using AI to write books, try and write screenplays, write songs, write art. And with that, we're seeing like that's mainly coming from a lot of like capitalist interests, right? If we all remember the Hollywood strike from last year, which I'm sure you guys, or I know you guys were very keen on, a lot of that issue was like, you know, Disney wanted to replace background actors with computer generated images and stuff, or use their likeness. And I think as we get closer to technologies that can do this, we're not going to see what we've been promised, which is like the Jetsons, where a robot will do all our work. Like those machines are going to start taking the things we love, right? They're going to start creating really shitty movie and television scripts, in my opinion. They're writing books. Like I've had my books ripped off by AI and stuff. And I kind of see that relationship in Rain losing like her relationship to her brother. Like at many points during this, she says to him, like, who are you? She slaps him. She says, like, is Andy even in there? And I thought that was a very interesting, I don't know if it was intended, but that's how I took it, was that we are like, you know, AI is serving in the movie the interests of the Weyland-Yutani company. And that means that it's going to take away from some of the things we love, right? Mega studios are going to try and fire every scriptwriter and give us some pretty horrible movies and television, but it will generate them profit. And so I really like that because I think a lot of shows, movies, stuff, their commentary on AI is like, it's going to take over the world. It'll be Skynet, Terminator, etc. And I think what will really happen is it'll just be put up to capitalist exploitation, at least in this century. And so I thought that was a very interesting way of portraying that. That was a very long-winded way of answering your question,
That's
Frank.
so
I'm sorry.
No, that was right. No, that was great. And I loved Andy, the character in this movie. I think I had heard some, like when I was like reading reviews or listening to movie podcasts, I'd been hearing like David Johnson is stellar in this movie. And I was blown out of the water. But one, in his performance, absolutely amazing. Thought it was the best performance in the film. Yeah. And I think this is my second favorite take on the synthetic within the Alien franchise, next to David in the Prometheus and Covenant films. This is like a hallmark of the Alien movies. There's always one AI synthetic, you know, android character amongst the human crew. And I really loved, because there's just a version of the synthetic that we have not seen in these movies before. And I really charted Andy's arc as one of, you know, when we meet him, like you're saying, Joe, he's been basically abandoned and decommissioned by Weyland-Yutani. He's garbage. Like no one wanted him anymore. Rain's father was the one who essentially picked him up and reprogrammed him and said, you know, hey, now your directive is to do what's best for Rain. So then we see his transformation when he gets his software update, and then gets some software that is closer aligned to what Weyland-Yutani wants. It was like the arc of watching like what AI can be if it's built for the betterment of humanity. And that's what his first iteration is. And then what he becomes is what AI is when it is being used for the betterment of profit for the company. His directive literally changes from do what's best for Rain to do what's best for the company. And I just thought it was such a smart story construction to like literally have him do a software update in the middle that changes him from someone who cares about humans to someone who does not give a shit about humans anymore. And then to get to see him change back after they, you know, rip the disc out of his head. But I just thought I was really blown away by it. And I really cannot say enough about David Johnson's performance, especially when he switches to Super Andy. You're just like, damn, Where did all that come from? That was unbelievable.
Yeah, David Johnson's amazing in this. I only knew him from Industry, so I think he's just kind of starting his
Same.
career. But wow. Maybe that's also why. I think you're right. Without him, I think the movie would have felt really flat like that. He was just part of the reason it was so, like, you could just stay with it the whole time. What you're both saying about AI is so interesting. I kept going back and forth on my take. I mean, part of what I kept coming to is because I was so conflicted. I loved Andy so much, but I'm like, you gotta get rid of Andy. Like, even Andy as Andy was created by the corporation. And to me, that was like the end message was like, if he's created by if he's of the corporation, he will always be transformed, like be capable of working for the corporation. And even I thought it was interesting that even though the directive changed, I don't know that his tactics changed. Like he had better tools, but to be honest, this is what was so confusing to me as the viewer of like, whereas like, what am I actually supposed to be thinking here? Because he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. Okay. The AIs were not wrong. I was like, this idea that the AIs are capable of like doing sort of what's better for all of humanity because they're not emotionally attached to one person. Like even how that one character was so upset that the AI had
Bjorn
was really upset with Andy because a previous AI had killed his minor parents, but then it was revealed that the AI had to make the decision between like 3 minors or 12, like saving the lives of 12 minors or 3. And while obviously that's in the best interest of the corporation, as these are just workers and labor, it's also better for the humans, and it's a hard choice. And so I found myself still being like, well, Andy's really the only one making the right choices. Like, yes, you should close that door on this dude. Like, she's actually, which made me feel conflicted about what the story was saying, because if I had to come down to it, I probably wouldn't kill Andy, even though my anti-capitalist self is like, you got to get rid of Andy. Realistically, to survive, it almost was like, in order to survive, you have to align with the corporation. And so there was a problem there for me in terms of the politics.
Well, it's also an echo of Alien 1, which is where Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's character, is the character that says, no, they do not get back on the ship. But you're right.
Right.
But
she was strong as fuck in that choice. And here they were all like, no. I'm like, are you kidding? You can't let the alien in. These are crazy aliens.
Yeah. The first thing I want to hit on is something you said, Riv, where like, I think one of my biggest complaints about this movie is like, without Andy and Rain, the rest of the characters do fall flat. Like they're, all the background people, like, and they had opportunities. Like I was very surprised that they chose not to do anything with the pregnancy besides like the reveal of the alien you can see coming. Like I thought that would come back, right? Like maybe the father was on the space station and the pregnant woman was on the trip on the ship, and they would have to like, that would be another conflict, right? That like, I don't know, maybe Andy's, directives comes back and stuff. But you're right. Like there are a couple scenes where I think, I'm trying to remember their names. I think it's Kay is about to be like taken by the xenomorph, the alien, and like everyone's like, open the door. And Andy's like, no, there's a giant fucking monster there. He's going to eat all of us if I open the door. He is right. And like that is,
and this is the problem with the storytelling. If his directive was to protect Rain, he would have made the same choice. So it was like kind of sloppy to me. It just didn't work because you're like, that didn't change. And a lot of the big pivotal moments, you're like, again, if his directive is to protect Rain, he's making the same choices. He just has more superpowers now.
I think you're right, because the whole time he's with them, he's like just leading them into the bio lab, right? Like, and you kind of get the sense he doesn't care if they like make it there. Like he almost shuts the door on Tyler, I believe, and stuff when they're being chased by the face huggers. But he is like, I think what he's really doing is just protecting himself because he knows he has to get there. And it's like, well, if the humans make it, whatever, But you're right. It is like a complication of the even the movie's message and stuff like that.
Yeah, because if the message is anti-capitalist and if the message is like the directive to protect Rain is different than the directive to protect the company at all costs, those need to be different, like in the screenwriting. And I got confused at like, I was like, I understand the message of like, this is bad, that his directive is to protect the company, but I didn't really see where I think in the first Alien, those moments were clearer of like why what's right for the company is totally antithetical to like what's right for humanity. And here those things kind of align. So it was sort of felt like if you're voting, like if this is Trump's platform, I'm not like, I'm not sure why. What's the opposition? Like we have more heart and like we all die. I don't know.
What an apt reference.
That's a really good point, because in the first movie there is that moment where Ian Holmes' character as Ash turns on on what remains of the crew, because they're basically like, if I'm remembering correctly, like, hey, we got to kill this alien, and he says, no, you're not killing this alien. It's now my job to just capture this alien. I don't care what happens to you guys. And you're right. There's no moment where Andy turns on the humans. He's just less concerned with their safety, which you're right is muddled if we're going off of directly like this directive.
Well, he almost becomes more concerned because he's better at keeping them safe. Even though he's more clear about like this is for the company, he does keep them all fucking safe. Like he does. Like without him, they would have all died.
Yeah.
And you're right. In the first one, she had he pulls out the guns. He does everything. And in the first one, Sigourney Weaver's character had so much authority, and there was just such a strong. It kind of was a shame for Kaylee Spaney's character that like it took away some of her agency because they got so obsessed with Andy that like she didn't have any of that like real. She had the heart, but like there wasn't like any moment where you're like, this is brilliant. This is what needs to happen. She's carrying the plot forward. Like it was all on Andy, which made it confusing for me politically where I was supposed to align, because again, he is made from the company. And then it doesn't help that David Johnson just like gives it so much depth. And you're like, what? Wait, I'm lost in this performance. What is this saying?
That's true. Yeah. This is kind of more of like Andy's movie than it is Rain's movie.
Yeah. And she's great. I mean, she's great too. Kaylee Spaney's fucking awesome. I mean, I think she's been amazing fantastic in everything she's done.
She's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, also in terms of performance, but definitely in terms of story and character, there's much, much more development that happens with David, and he carries a lot more of the action on his shoulders throughout the movie.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I do think you're right, Riv, in that, you know, the movie is probably weakest when you take away all the alien elements, right? All the spectacle and all the horror and stuff. Like, as we said, the supporting cast is flat. It's not really clear, like, where the xenomorphs are coming from or why they don't really show up until the end.
Or
I think you can probably...
Why, and maybe you both can explain this to me. Maybe this is something you need context for. But why the fuck has no one been warned about the fucking aliens? They're all so surprised. I'm sorry, like, has no one mentioned there are aliens out there?
This is alien lore. Are you asking like why like minors don't know about? Yeah,
I'm asking why they go onto this ship and they're so surprised. I'm like, I would know if I'm going out onto a ship in space to look for aliens.
Yeah.
Give us what's the corporate espionage answer to this, Joe?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what it is like I'm really waiting for a alien movie to dive into this, but like all throughout this time period in like Alien 1, there's like a Cold War going on Earth between Weyland-Yutani, which is basically like taken over like America and all the capitalist countries, and then I believe it's called the Union of Progressive Peoples, which is like a Soviet Union stand-in, which is actually centered out of Spain, which is very interesting. And so basically it's like a bio-weapons race. And so because Weyland-Yutani finds the original creature first, they don't tell anyone of it. And so it's not like public knowledge, which is why, at least, I don't know if they explicitly say this, but I kind of put it together. Like the reason this space station has been abandoned is because it's essentially like a CIA black site. Like no one knows it's there. No one knows what it's working on. So when communication goes dark, it kind of just falls off the grid and slips into a gravity or the gravity of the planet, I believe. So that's kind of like the backstory of it. I do wish they would explain that a little bit more, because all throughout like I think there's got to be over 10 Alien movies right now. They never really discuss it. They mention it a little bit in like Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, but not really in any meaningful way. Yeah.
Well, Joe, I've got some good news for you. right now on the FX network, the TV creator Noah Hawley, who did the Fargo TV series, he is adapting an Alien series for television, the title of which is Alien: Earth. So
I'm so excited.
You're getting a whole TV show, baby.
Let's go. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so pumped for that. Yeah. There's some really cool stuff in this expanded universe that is only available to absolute dorks like myself at this time. But I think will kind of come to light over the next few years and stuff.
Yeah, and Riv, the other reason that no one knows about the aliens is that these are all isolated incidents, and none of the miners, none of the crew, none of the working class people have the ability to communicate with one another. So, like, the only people that actually collectively know about the alien are Weyland-Yutani, like, is the corporate side of things. So I'm not gonna fucking tell people.
I understand it. I hope in the Earth one, because I just don't buy. From the beginning of time, there's been people who, like, you're on the planet, there's extraterrestrials. I was just sharing with Frank, I'm watching the Manhattan alien abduction on Netflix right now.
Nice.
But I just think, I say that it sounds really niche, but it is number 2 on Netflix. So I need you both to know this is wildly popular. It's not just me. But I do think, like, people, they're in space. There's got to be, like, conspiracy theorists, even in their, like, I know they can't talk, but, like, in their little communities. I want to see some, like, to not think anything's there.
There's probably rumblings, there's probably like, there's probably like, like back alley communication streams, someone's like, hey, here's some fucking shit went down on the Nostromo, like the Nostromo, like that mining rig. Like, yeah, I heard some shit went down.
That's
like,
what I want to see. That's fun.
So I think I do know this movie takes place between Alien 1 and Aliens. So, like, in Aliens, the second one, you find out Sigourney Weaver, or Ripley, has been asleep for, I think, a century. Like, she's just drifting through. And so no one has
she
heard,
hasn't been
like,
able to tell anyone.
Yeah, and so no one has really heard, because we do see them go pick up the, I don't know what you would call it, like, charcoaled version of the xenomorph from Alien 1.
Yeah, the fossilized xenomorph.
And why does she go to sleep?
Yeah, she goes to sleep in, like, a cryo sleep thing. And in the beginning of Alien 2, I believe they say she, like, drifted through the network, like, through all the shipping channels, and no one picked her up and stuff. And someone in, like, the way out the other side of the network found her. So she was kind of like a loss. And yeah. So
okay,
I think
I'm just saying, if I'm Sigourney Weaver, I'm finding a Sharpie, or maybe writing in alien blood. I get there was, like, a lot happening before she gets into this cryo thing. You write a warning message. Something.
Good point.
If this is a political movie about organizing, you got to let other people know. Because look what happens. You don't let other people know, and a whole other movie happens. Literally these people doing the same thing. No lessons learned.
0 lessons learned.
Zero lessons
Negative
learned.
lessons. They're worse in this movie than they were in the last one. Yeah.
Honestly, I hope they never learn the lessons, because then they'll stop making these movies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Joe, remind me, Aliens 2, what the general premise is. Because I remember I know that it's like there's a planet with multiple aliens, so they're basically sending in, like, the militarized unit from Weyland-Yutani. Is that it?
Yeah, so in Alien 1, they land on one planet and find, obviously, the xenomorph. And then in the beginning of Alien 2, when Sigourney Weaver wakes up, she tells this story, and they all are like, no, you're lying. And then they say, like, we know you're lying, or we know you're imagining it, because that planet where they found the alien is colonized now. And there's, like, 50 families living there and stuff. And then they lose contact with the families. And so they send a team of Marines. And wouldn't you know it, it was a corporate cover-up all along. Who would have thunk? Yeah. I do like, really, and I actually think this ties back to this movie. One of the things I really like about this movie, but, like, Alien 1 was, like, pretty much a horror movie, right? And it was science fiction. Aliens is, has horror and grotesque elements, but Riv, I know you haven't seen it. There's, like, probably 300 aliens, and they just mow them down with machine guns and stuff. So it's much more like an action movie. And I thought this movie did a good job of blending those two themes with the themes from, like, Prometheus and Covenant, as Frank was talking about, like all the all the themes and motifs about religion and humanity's role in the universe and like what technology things. And that's where like that black goo came in. I thought this movie had a really difficult job of trying to satisfy like all three of those storylines because when Prometheus came out, people wanted an alien movie. They just wanted, monster running around the spaceship eating people. And that's not what they got. And personally, I loved Prometheus and Covenant. I thought they were great. I really liked, they were good movies. They just weren't aliens. And so now you had some people who wanted like that old Jaws in space movie that Alien was billed as. You wanted some people who had the machine guns and the pulse rifles. And then, of course, you had people who wanted the answers that were raised by, the questions that were raised by Prometheus and Covenant. And I thought this movie had a really difficult job that no Alien movie has been able to do since one of the first ones of like kind of taking this entire expanded universe and giving some portion of that to every aspect of the audience. And so I feel like Alvarez really had to like land 3 different planes in one movie. And I think they did it well. I think it was certainly like, terrifying and grotesque in some places. I watched Rain rip an umbilical cord with her bare hands to separate a mother from a mutant baby. I don't know how it can get more horror than that. But it also had, the cool pulse rifles, the visuals were amazing in this movie. And then also like it had that bit at the end about, Weyland-Yutani trying to reverse engineer the DNA and put it in humans, and that evolutionary aspect that was front and center in the prequels. So that's why I think I'm a huge fan of this, because I think it is a really impressive feat, I think, to try and be able to do all that.
Which, just about the DNA, are we mad at? Again, I was confused. Because I was like, am I mad at that? Because it seems good.
At the black goo?
Am I on? At like, the bio stuff that could like bring humans back to life. I was like...
Yeah, the stuff that Kay shoots into her neck.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you saw how that turned out for everybody, right?
It didn't turn out well, but they also didn't get it back to the lab for better research.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? I just like, there wasn't a strong enough, they didn't give enough for me to be like, I was like, am I on the Wayland side? Like, what is going, like, they are making good reasons.
This movie radicalized you to be in favor of Weyland-Yutani?
I'm an evolutionist now.
I think the stuff about the black goo was like, I never took it to be, they're trying to cure cancer. That does not seem like their benefit.
They weren't, but like they could, right? Weren't they on to something, or am I wrong? Like I was like, they are on to something.
Yeah, but
they are.
I think they explicitly say we're trying to create a race of humans that can work forever. They're like, they don't mince words about it. They're not like, we're trying to cure cancer, or like make humanity more happy and healthy. They're like, no, we need humans that can go into a mine for a 18-hour shift and come out and not die from black lung.
Well, I guess it's that, but that's interesting. It's like the twist on AI. It's like, that's a tool that could also be really helpful to like all of the humans that can't like survive in like the climate catastrophize. Like it is something that could be very, very useful for the other side. There just wasn't a strong enough left in this movie to give us that perspective. But like, if this got in the right hands of the right people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I took it as like, I can't remember what the character's name is in this movie, but it's basically Ian Holm, like the likeness of Ian Holm that they like made the android,
Rook,
which
I believe.
Rook, is that what it is? Yeah, which I have feelings about, I would say. I feel like that's always kind of weird when they
I wanted to
don't
talk
really
about that, yeah.
It was
we can talk about that
weird.
now. I personally, I'm like, I'm sure the estate signed off on it and stuff, but I'm also like, yeah, I'm sure you kind of just offered them $1 million and did it. And I feel like it would also
and it's also very problematic, right? For like what we're all fighting for.
Yeah. I also didn't think it looked very good. I thought it was the worst visual in the movie. Right?
It was the shittiest. Yeah, it was the shittiest CG in the whole movie.
Yeah. And like one of the reasons I think this was a mistake from every perspective was, from Alien to Aliens, like there's another android, but it doesn't look like Ian Holm because they say like, oh, we identified the flaws of the Ian Holm type and upgraded him, right? So like that's why it's a different character. I thought they could have literally taken anybody's face and just done that. And it wouldn't have run into those ethical issues. It wouldn't have would have looked better. I mean, the original Ian Holm from 1979 looked way better than this.
It was the one part of the movie that felt extremely fan servicey and kind of runs antithetical to everything that we love about this franchise. Is was very much just a franchise play. You know, it was definitely a studio head saying, you know, but we got to bring back someone from the legacy movie because then the fans will really love that. And for all the reasons, you know, it's for all the ethical reasons about literally resurrecting a dead actor to make him, you know, be in this movie, to the fact that it just looked bad. Yeah, it felt completely unnecessary. It felt cheap. It felt cheap for a movie that was pretty rich in ideas and in visuals. Like we're saying, Fede Álvarez is an incredible visual director. His shit is off the walls. And this, it just looked bad and felt bad.
Yeah. If I can go back to the thing Riv was saying, like, I took it as, like, I think Rook says, like, oh, we found the xenomorph and it survived, like, being encapsulated in, like, I don't even know, carbon or crystallized or whatever. And he says, like, it doesn't require food, it doesn't require oxygen, like, it's the perfect organism. And between that and the way this movie treats AI, like, I think it's just the theme of, like, this corporation does not give a shit about humanity, right? It's not saying, like, we can cure people and help them live longer. It's fine. Like, the thing is, they saw what the black goo did to that rat in the laboratory, how it, like, mutated it and killed it, and are still praising this, right? And I think that kind of speaks back to the fact that, like, they don't view the goal of advancement, technological, societal evolution as, like, we're getting better as a society at producing things, so now we can, like, claw some of that back and have higher wages, more time. You can leave the sunless terror planet every once in a while. They view it as, like, okay, how can we go further, right? The people are of no concern to us. It doesn't matter that we might be able to cure their diseases. We're more interested in, like, hey, if you can send them into a mine, then they don't need oxygen, like, profit line goes up, right? So that's kind of where I came down on, like, the evolution thing. I also think there's, like, a huge theme throughout all of these movies, which I think we talked about last time, is, like, man, specifically capitalism's attempt to encroach on nature, right? Like, trying to take the alien, which is just really an animal, like, it's not really a villain, it's just doing what its life cycle commands of it, and trying to, like, mess with that. And I think that comes up every time someone gets killed by an alien. I also think it's really present in the prequels, Prometheus and Covenant, where David is trying to figure out, like, where humanity came from and how he can evolve it. And I think it's more of just a theme where, like, if you start going and pulling at the strings of, like, the foundation of our species, like, bad shit is going to happen. And I think that includes, like, trying to, you know, in Prometheus, one of the guys tries to become immortal, doesn't work out, he dies. Like, I think that is, like, kind of the theme they're hitting on with all this evolutionary stuff. And it's more just like, if we can all just chill and figure out how to live better lives, like, that stuff will come. But if we all try going to, like, play with it and engineer it before we're ready, it's just going to result in death. That's how I kind of land on it. Yeah.
No, that's a really
You know what
good
I
way.
think? Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think what I'm getting at that, like, I realize frustrates me about these movies is that after a certain point, it is like there is no the left is so weak, like, there's no organized defense. It just becomes these individualized stories, like this individualistic Sigourney Weavers, or, like, what happens with, you know, and then they go off and then they get separated, and it's just like, of course it's going to happen over and over again because there's no organizing. Does it ever in the universe, is there ever an organized force? Like, you know, I'm kind of like, let's get into the Matrix world. Like, let's get together and start talking, you know? Like, does that ever happen, Joe?
So there is. It's actually, I have a graphic novel who I'm trying to remember who it's by. It's by a famous director. I can't remember his name right now. But basically, he was approached to write the script for Alien 3. And he wrote it. And the plot is, after Aliens 2, and because this is how every Alien movie ends, you know, the characters are in a space, like, escape pod flying out through cryospace. And they actually drift into what is explicitly called a Marxist breakaway republic. So, like, people have organized themselves and, like, just, you know, taken control of, like, a section of the galaxy because it's just so broad that no one can do anything. And so when they drift through, it like raises all these like treaty concerns, all these like whose property is the xenomorph, because the xenomorph is in one of the people in the escape pod and stuff. But it does show like a group of people who I believe they say it started as like probably a mining colony or some type of workforce, and then had a revolution, took control of their planet and spread it into like a quasi government. Yeah. So that does happen.
Cool.
Unfortunately, that one didn't get made. They turned it into Alien 3 is set on like a prison colony, which is also very interesting for its own reasons. But yeah, there are like these strands of, even like I mentioned the video games, even throughout the video games, like there's just the world has been explored more in depth. And naturally, given the, you know, hyper exploitative nature of not only capitalism, but these stories, like characters do respond as we would think rationally. They do, you know, break away. There's some strikes and mutinies mentioned in other works and stuff. So that is a very real one. And usually, unfortunately, it comes down to Weyland-Yutani and the United Colonial Marines, which is like kind of the United States Marines working hand in glove to kill them. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying that the U.S. state is collaborating with a massive capitalist corporation to
Yeah,
repress
sci-fi, man.
the human
They come up with
population?
some wild ideas, you know? It's
Yeah.
really, you know, outside of the realm of possibility. Thank God we don't live in that world.
Real quickly before we go to the awards, I just want to shout out again Fede Álvarez, the director of this movie, because this had some of the best set pieces I feel like I've seen in an Alien movie in a while. I thought the entire first chest burster scene cut with the spaceship crashing into the hanging dock of the space station, I was just like on the edge of my seat, riveted. Just such incredible sci-fi filmmaking. And also, I gotta say, you know, the baby alien at the end, that was probably one of the most fucked up things I've seen in a while. And honestly, much scarier than a xenomorph. I would much rather watch 100 xenomorphs rip apart a human than one of those giant baby aliens. How did you feel about that?
Absolutely agree.
Do you think that was just Fede just being like, how can we just get more fucked up here at the end? Because like, I don't know if it was saying anything, but it did work in terms of being more fucked up, because it was. I did not enjoy that. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for the thrill, but I did not like looking at it.
It was the most unsettling thing I've seen on screen in a very long time. And I also thought they did a good job, like, you know, as anyone who's seen the original Alien knows, like, they don't always show you the xenomorph right away. I thought they did a good job revealing it, like, shot by shot, so that it slowly gets more unsettling. Like, first you see its face, and you're like, what the hell was that? And then it crawls over, then it stands up at one point, it shows you, like, its mouth within a mouth. That was pretty incredible, but I'm also like, who designed that? Like, whose twisted mind came up with that? I don't know if I really want to hang out with that person. I'll watch their movies, but
Who's the
that's about
sicko
it for-
behind this?
Exactly. Yeah. I also think, like, as you mentioned, Frank, like, if Dune 2 didn't come out this year, this would be highly up there for, like, you know, best visual effects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I love the way they use sound, because to remember the
Yes.
tagline, the tagline of the first one is, in space, no one can hear you scream. And right, Frank, like what you mentioned, that woman screaming on after the first chest burster, then there's an explosion, it goes to space, and it's like silent, right? Like that was, they
yeah.
did that a couple times too. I think that was like really good, and also like pulled you out of the action in a way. Like you'd be in a very frantic situation where they're running, and then you're back in space and there's no sound, and you're back into like people screaming, and it really like almost desensitized you and then resensitized you to the horror. Which I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah, this is in the top for me of the Alien franchise. This is I really like this a lot.
That was
All right.
good.
Now this is our opportunity to award this movie the things that we would love the most about it. So Joe, you might remember this. We have 3 awards we're going to give. So our first award is Best Politics, goes to the character with the best politics in the movie.
That's a hard one.
Hard.
Very hard.
It might be like one of, I don't even think it was Tyler, the main like subsequent, but maybe it was Bjorn, who like from the very beginning is like, just fuck this company, like let's go, like steal this. I'm trying to remember, or maybe Navarro, the young lady who I think dies first. They're just very like, this is bullshit. Let's go. Let's risk it. Maybe them, but at the same time, they're also
I would
like
say Tyler
dicks.
over them, only because I think
Really?
they all shared a politic, but I felt that Tyler led, like he was the true leader, and the
Yeah.
other two were very like, it almost that part of it got ahead of them. It like caused them to not think of the full group at times.
They were more
which I think
reactive.
they were reactive, and I think Tyler had to think of the full group and was strategic in his politics. Like he was the closest to like a real organizer or leader of like a radical movement in this movie.
That's true. And he's the one that tells Rain, you know, like, hey, playing within this system and just waiting for your quota to get filled up, that's not going to work. Like you have to see the truth here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it, and I would like to change my answer to Rib's answer. So
Yeah.
So
'cause I
it's
wouldn't say-
Tyler.
It's Tyler. Because I wouldn't say like nice Andy, because Andy doesn't really have politics. His politics is just, you know, do what's best for Rain. So yeah, Tyler.
Yeah.
Okay. Next award is worst politics. This is going to be the easy one. This goes to the character with the worst politics in the movie.
I mean, if I can check it up to the Whalen Yutani Corporation, it would be them. I guess to nail a character, it would be Rook, or even I'm looking at the IMDb here, the officer in the beginning of the movie who tells Rain like you have to do more hours, like a very person who's like, you know, also just in the system, but is a cog in the system that perpetuates
Yep.
it, right? You know, like maybe she could have. It looks like she manually increases Rain's hours right there. It's not like it already happened, you know. It kind of looks
Yeah.
like she's like, oh, we got
Yeah.
a good candidate, keep him around. I'm just following orders type of thing. And so actually I'm talking myself into it. I'm gonna go with she's credited as WY Whalen Yutani officer. So yeah, I'm gonna say her.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I think that's
Second.
Yeah, I was gonna say Rook because he is the manifestation of corporate self-interest, but he is also an AI. So there's no agency, there's no free will to choose those politics. That's what he's programmed with. Whereas, as you're saying, Joe, the WY officer very much is agreeing to, you know, to be a part of maintaining the system if it means that she gets to sit on this side of the glass and not be on the other side of the glass. So good call. All right.
Good call. We like it. All right. And our last award is Best Supporting. This is the character that you wish this movie was about or want to see a spinoff about.
I would love to see a spin-off of the mining colony, of like
Yes.
what happens when they increase everyone's hours to double, right? Like even just what I said about the officer, I'm getting the sense they don't do it all in one fell swoop because that would breed dissent, and that they're selectively picking certain people to stay. I would love to see a movie like that where if you can tie in the alien, great, but also like space sci-fi coal mining strike sounds like a fantastic movie. Like a West Virginia coal mine wars, but like on a different planet. That would be incredibly good. So I'll take anyone from the
Yeah.
beginning, maybe
I
just
love
one of the
that.
guys in the background. Yeah, I think that'd be a great movie and a lot of fun.
That's a good one. Yeah, I was gonna say like I could watch more of Super Andy. But that I think is a performance thing. I was just so taken by David Johnson's performance
Yeah.
that I just wanted more of him on screen. But you're right. I want to see the worker organizing movement on the mining planet. Joe, have you seen Andor? Did we talk about this last time you were here?
I don't know. I have seen Andor, and I did get like Andor vibes from some of like the shots around this. Yeah, I don't remember talking about Andor with you guys, but I could be wrong. But
Andor's one
Yeah.
that's definitely been coming up a lot. We'll have to figure out a way to do it.
We're trying to figure out a way to cover it. We'll do it at some point. But
Yeah.
Riv, you should watch it just on your own because it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite TV shows of the last decade.
I hear it's amazing. We'll
amazing.
probably make us do it so that I watch it.
It's doing all of the things that we're talking about, which is
Yes,
like
yes.
it is a real world on the ground. Like how is intergalactic fascism affecting every single person in this galaxy.
You guys could do like I think they're doing a second season of Andor and only 2 because I can't remember the actor's name, but he was like, I'm not doing this for 7 seasons. But you could do
Damn.
Rogue One after that season comes out and like discuss the 2 seasons and then ladder it up into the concluding movie. Spoiler alert, but yeah.
Wow.
We'll figure out a way to
That's
cover it at some
epic.
point. Yeah, Joe, thank you so much again for reaching out. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about this movie on the podcast. It was fantastic.
Me too.
Before we let you go, last thing we like to ask our guest, what are you doing in your everyday life? I know we're like in election season. This will be coming out after election season, but what are you doing day to day where you get a chance to practice your anti-capitalist values in a way that, you know, is that maybe a listener could start doing in their own way? Definitely.
Well, the first thing I do, shameless plug, joewrote.com. If you want to read about anti-capitalist ideas, just check it out. I think I mentioned this last time. I can't remember. I'm going to say it again because I know, one, your listenership has drastically increased since I've came on. Congrats, by the way. And 2, I think this is like a...
Thank you for your help with that, by the way.
Of course, yeah. All credit goes to me. Yeah, I'll take that. I heard someone once explain it as decommodified hours of just like finding ways to exist like without consuming, like without like needing to, you know, be buying something or doing something like that. And this isn't to shame anyone and say like going shopping is bad or something, but I can find like times where I'm just like, I don't know, I'm like hanging out in the park or walking my dog or just like existing and not forcing myself to create value or some way, something like that, or to consume. I find that's when I'm like most grounded, and it really helps you remember that, like, you know, capitalism is a construct, and that word is somewhat of a cliche, but like it is an artificial creation, and our lives and our feelings, such as, you know, relaxation, joy, that stuff is like is true on an inherent nature, and that will exist. It existed before capitalism, it'll exist in capitalism, and it'll exist after capitalism. So I think if we can just all remember that, it really helps us escape the crushing feeling that the present is inevitable, because I don't believe it is.
Love that.
Beautiful. Joe,
Thank
it was
you.
great to see you. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Joe.
Thank you all so much for listening, and make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support this show, our Patreon link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com. Also, if you're part of a progressive or leftist organization you would like to advertise on this show, shoot us an email at moviesvscapitalism@gmail.com.
We are going to take our Thanksgiving break, but we'll be back with some Christmas movies, so stay tuned.
Happy Thanksgiving,
Thanks, everyone.